So with pitchers and catchers reporting to spring training in just under 2 weeks, I figured, you know what, this is a good time to start talking about each team's offseason and grading their offseason, basically seeing how they did, who did the best, who did the worst. And since we have 30 teams to talk about, we're going to keep it short, sweet, and to the point, really talking about the major moves they made and just giving them a grade based on that. So with that being said, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see some more videos like this, make sure you hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel if you're new and enjoy the content, and as always in the comment section, let me know where your opinion differed from mine. I know a lot of you guys are going to disagree with me, so let me know where you agreed, disagreed, what you thought what a team should have gotten instead. Let me know in the comment section down below. If you missed last video, I'm going to put a link to it above me right here. Go and give it a watch. And all social media links, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, are down below. Go and give them a follow. So let's start with the Baltimore Orioles. We're going to start with the AL, work through them, and then obviously go to the NL. So let's start with the Orioles. I'm just going to go straight up C minus. They really didn't do much. They lost VR and Dylan Bundy. Those were the two big names. And then the two players that they brought in, which are of note, are Jose Iglesias and Wade LeBlanc. Not too much has changed with the team. They really weren't expected to do much. So that's why I'm just going to give them a C, because they really didn't do much. They didn't really improve. It was kind of a like for like change with the players that they did lose and gain. So C minus, C. The Orioles, really not much to talk about. Next up, let's talk about the Red Sox. And the Red Sox have had a rough offseason. They haven't added really anybody, Jose Peraza really being the big one. They haven't really lost much either, but they did lose their manager, and that is a huge loss. They still haven't appointed a new one, and I feel like they're in a very bad spot. So Red Sox, for me, I'm giving them an F. They've had a rough offseason. They haven't improved. They're in a bad spot. They haven't gotten a new manager, so how do you expect much to be instilled into the team heading into the new year? It's a tough spot. Boston Red Sox, they got an F for me. Let's move to the Tampa Bay Rays, and I actually am kind of impressed with what they were able to do this year. They did lose Avisail Garcia, Travis d'Arnaud, Matthew Liberatore, and Tommy Pham, but they were able to improve the team a little bit. I do still think maybe their bullpen could use a little bit of help, but with the additions of Yoshi, Jose Martinez, Hunter Renfroe, and Xavier Edwards in their farm system, I really do like what they were able to do this offseason. Their offense, I think, was taken up to a new level, and I'm gonna give them a B+. I like what they did offensively. I still think they could improve a little bit on the pitching side, but I definitely think this was a good offseason for them. So for me, B+. Next up, let's talk about the Blue Jays. And the Blue Jays were in a weird spot. I really didn't expect much from them this offseason. I thought they were going to slowly continue to rebuild this team and still kind of focus on those young players that they have. But they actually went out and got some pretty good arms. Hyunjin Ryu was one of them. They brought in Tanner Roark, who's a decent veteran to have into your squad. And then they also brought in Yamaguchi, who, coming from overseas, could potentially be a really solid pickup. They've also brought in Travis Shaw, and they did lose Justin Smoke, but I feel like Travis Shaw is gonna, make up for the hitting ability that Justin Smoke is leaving. So for me, I like the moves that they made. I still think pitching is a huge problem for the Blue Jays. So if they're able to improve that bullpen, that starting rotation just a little bit more, maybe let those young arms develop, I think they'd be in a good spot. But for me, this offseason, I like the moves they made. I'm going to give them a B+. I don't think it was a really good offseason, but they're at least taking the steps to make their team better. And I feel like the pitchers and the players that they did add, they were good moves. So B+ for me for the Blue Jays. Alrighty, let's finish out the division with the Yankees. And for me, the big addition, obviously, Garrett Cole. It makes sense. They also brought back Brett Gardner. They did lose Dellin Betances, as well as Didi Gregorius, and obviously Domingo Herman to suspension. But when you bring in Garrett Cole to fill that spot that Domingo Herman is leaving, you're also bringing back Sevi from injury. And the big thing with the Yankees is staying healthy. They proved that even when they weren't healthy, they were still one of the best teams in baseball. So bringing in a top pitcher, and then really, yeah, you lose Dellin and you lost Didi, but you don't really lose too much. The bullpen was already one of the best in baseball, if not the best in baseball. And you have Glaber taking over at short. So for me, I really like what the Yankees did. I think they only got better. The big thing for them is just trying to stay healthy. So for me, I like the Yankees. I'm going to give them an A. It wasn't the most, yeah, they got Garrett Cole, which is a huge signing, but they really didn't do too much else outside of that. But for me, it's still a really good move. I like the Yankees offseason. I'm going to give them an A. All right, let's move on. Let's start with kind of the two of the weaker teams in baseball. Let's start first with the Detroit Tigers. And for me, they didn't really lose too much. Yeah, they lost a lot of they lost quite a few players, but they didn't really lose anyone of note. I'm not really oh man, they really lost this guy or they really lost that guy. And for me, they actually added a couple decent players. They added CJ Cron, Jonathan Scope. They brought in Ivan Nova. They kept Matthew Boyd. And you know what? To be honest, the Tigers really didn't have a terrible offseason. They didn't have like an amazing offseason, but it wasn't a bad one at all. So to be able to add a couple decent bats, keep their top pitcher, and then also have Ivan Nova join the squad, it wasn't terrible. I'm going to give them like a C+, B-. Be a little bit generous with them because I think they improved a little bit, but I don't think they're going to be a contender in their division or anything. Let's continue moving on. Let's talk about the Royals, who, I mean, adding Michael Franco, you got Greg Holland, you were able to keep Alex Gordon. You didn't really lose too much with the team, but not much is to be said with them. I'm just going to give them a C because, I mean, I don't really know if Michael Franco is going to prove to be that much. I think he has some potential, but he's really got to show it. Maybe he's going to get some more play in the team. So C+ for them. All right, let's move to the Indians because this is an interesting one because they were able to keep on to Lindor so far. They did trade away Kluber. They lost Puig. They cut Jason Kipnis, or they didn't bring back with the player option or club option. But for me, they were able to bring in Cesar Hernandez to take Kipnis' spot. They were able to bring in Clase and then DeShields from the Kluber trade. And then obviously they kept Lindor, which is a huge win for them. So I don't think it was a terrible offseason for the Indians. I think it was okay. I think the big win is keeping Lindor. So for me, B-. Obviously, I don't think they improved too much, if at all, but the big thing for them was being able to keep Lindor, and I think that's a good. Let's talk about the Twins. They did lose Jonathan Scope, they did lose CJ Cron and also Kyle Gibson, but outside of that, not much is lost. They were able to bring in the big one, Josh Donaldson. They kept a lot of their pitching staff with Jake Odorizzi, Michael Pineda. They brought back Sergio Romo, and then they were able to extend the contract of Miguel Sano, who's going to be their new first baseman. So offensively, I think they improved. They really got better with the addition of Josh Donaldson. The thing with them is they really they exceeded expectations with their bullpen and their pitching staff last year. Can they repeat that this year? And I don't know if they can. So for me, the addition of Josh Donaldson is a huge plus, but I still think pitching for them is a big question mark. So I'm going to give them a B, B- because getting Josh Donaldson is good, but they didn't really address that bullpen. They didn't really improve the pitching staff. They missed out on Wheeler. They missed out on Mad Bum. So for me, B, B- because they did get Donaldson, but they didn't really improve that pitching staff, which I thought was their bigger issue this year. All right, let's finish with the winners of the division this offseason. Chicago White Sox. Whew. Yeah, they lost Yolmer Sanchez, big whoop. They lost Ivan Nova, big whoop. They lost Wellington Castillo. Okay, whatever. But the big thing is they added so much. They were able to sign Luis Robert to a contract extension, so he's going to be on the MLB roster day one. They added Nomar Mazara. They brought back Jose Abreu. Yasmani Grandal's on the team. Dallas Keuchel, Gio Gonzalez, Steve Cishek, Edwin Encarnacion. So a lot of offensive power. They were able to add some pitchers who definitely are going to help the team. Are they world beaters? Definitely not. They're not the best in the world, but you know what? I still think there were good moves for the White Sox. Offensively, this team is set. They don't really need to improve anywhere else. Luis Robert is going to fill that spot in center field. They have Nick Madrigal coming up in second base soon. Offensively, set. I do think they still need a couple more pitchers, and I think they do have some young arms coming up, but I definitely think Dallas Keuchel really isn't your long-term solution. Neither is Gio Gonzalez. You do have Lucas Giolito, who looks to be your ace for the future, but missing out on Mad Bum, missing out on Zach Wheeler was huge. So for me, they still had a fantastic offseason. I'm going to give them an A-, B+, but if they were able to get one of those better starting pitchers, I would have thrown them in that A+ category. Alrighty, let's move to the West. We're going to start with the Seattle Mariners, who I feel like they got worse. I don't think they really did much. I know they're really planning for the future. They have a great farm system. They're looking more for their prospects to come up and do well in the next couple of years, but they lost more than they brought in. Obviously, they traded away Narvaez and a couple other players left from free agency, and they didn't really add too much. Hirano, CJ Edwards, Margavicius were really their only additions. So for me, D. I don't really like the moves that they made. I don't really think they improved. I think they got worse. So not much else needs to be said. Mariners, I'm gonna give them a D. Oakland Athletics, a team that, like, they're always pretty solid. You know, Marcus Semien had a great year last year. You look at, you know, just the team that they have. It's a solid team. The issue with them is they didn't really get anything this offseason. They didn't really get better. The really only addition that they did make was Tony Kemp from the Cubs in a trade. They lost Blake Trinan. They lost Tanner Roark. They lost Jerks and Profar. And so I feel like they got worse and they didn't really improve. So for me, I'm going to give them a C-. They didn't really do much this offseason and they didn't look to improve the team. So I think they're going to start to fall. We're going to move to the Rangers, who I think had a decent offseason. You know, they traded away Mazzara. They traded away Clase, DeShields, and also they lost Hunter Pence. But they were able to add a couple decent pitchers in Jordan Lyles, Kyle Gibson. Corey Kluber is a big arm to add to that starting rotation. So that rotation with Lynn and also Minor being added, that's a decent rotation, one of the better ones in baseball. And then you also look at, you added the Todd Father, which I mean, I know is not like an amazing third baseman, but that's a little bit of pop when he's on, when he's feeling it. And then they also added Robinson Chirinos. I still think third base and catcher are a big issue for them. They do have some young players coming up that could potentially work out for them. But missing out on Rendon and also Josh Donaldson was a huge issue for them. I also think missing out on Nicholas Castellanos to play outfield for them is another big miss. So was it a terrible offseason for the Rangers? No. I think starting pitching is set now as long as everything works out. And I think improving the bullpen and then trying to find a better third baseman and also a better catcher would really help this squad. I'm going to give them a B- because I do think they improved that pitching at least. And that's a good step forward in the right direction. Alrighty, we're gonna move over to LA. We're gonna talk about the Angels now, who they didn't really lose too much. They lost Cole Calhoun, they lost Zach Cozart, if you really want to talk about a loss. But they were able to add Dylan Bundy, Julio Teheran to the starting pitching. But the big one obviously is Anthony Rendon. Huge asset to the team now. That is a big win for the team. The big question mark is still pitching. They really didn't address that. Julio Teheran and Dylan Bundy, those aren't your solutions for starting pitching. They do say they have some young guys that they have some faith in, but that's not good enough. You want to win now. You have Mike Trout. You obviously have Anthony Rendon now. You have Shohei Ohtani. You have a team that is like hitting their prime. Like they're in their prime. You need to get the best out of those players, and you're not spending the money to improve that pitching. That's a big question mark for this team. So for me, I'm going to give them a B-. Anthony Rendon is a big win for the team, but they didn't really improve too much. They did at least try to address pitching with some, budget options, but I don't think it was good enough. Let's move to the Astros, who they lost Garrett Cole. They lost Hector Rondon, Wade Miley, Will Harris. They traded away Jake Marisnick, and obviously the huge cheating scandal where, they just now hired Dusty Baker as their manager because they had to fire, or they fired theirs. The only addition is Martin Maldonado, really. They kept a couple players that were heading into free agency, but for me, this is a rough offseason for the Astros. They didn't really improve. They already have a really good team, but you know what? You didn't really get better. You actually lost some players. So for me, I'm thinking like a D. And, with this whole cheating scandal, you had to get a new manager so close to spring training, possibly an F. This is a rough offseason for the Astros, and I don't really know if they got much better. Alrighty, we made it through the American League, and we kept it somewhat short. We're going to try to go a little bit quicker through the NL, though, because I realized I kind of went a little bit too long with the American League. So let's start with Miami. I think they had a decent offseason. They didn't really lose too much, Starlin Castro being the big one, but they were able to add Brandon Kinsler. They brought in Corey Dickerson, Matt Kemp, if that works out, Jonathan Villar, Jesus Aguilar. Small moves, but efficient moves. But for the most part, I like the moves that they made. B- for the Marlins. They're small moves, but they're efficient moves. They're low risk, high reward type moves. Next up, we're gonna go to Philadelphia, and they didn't lose too much. Cesar Hernandez, Corey Dickerson, Pat Neshek, Michael Franco. So none of their big names, and they were able to add Didi and Zach Wheeler. So a great arm for the rotation, a solid shortstop. But the big thing is, pitching is still a question mark. You do have Aaron Nola, you do have Zach Wheeler, Jake Arrieta's meh. 4 or 5 in your rotation. Who's that going to be? Your bullpen now has some questions as well. You didn't really address too much more outside of Zach Wheeler. You did add Didi Gregorius, great for the offensive lineup, but your offense was already good. The question mark was the pitching. So for me, B- for the Phillies. They did get a little bit better with the pitching, but I don't think it was enough to really improve the squad. The New York Mets, I kind of like the moves that they did. They didn't really lose too much. Zach Wheeler, I felt was going to be surplus. If you're, you have Stroman, you have Syndergaard, you have DeGrom. Zach Wheeler would have been a really strong 3 and 4, but that's a lot of money to pay for Zach Wheeler. And with the options of Porcello and Walker, they also have some other options that they have. They have depth at the starting pitching spot. They brought in Dylan Betances. They also brought in Jake Marisnick. They restructured Yoenis Cespedes' contract. I like the moves the Mets made. I think it helped them out a little bit more. Even the restructuring of the contract for Yoenis Cespedes was a huge asset. That's how they were able to bring in Dylan Betances. The Mets, I like the moves. I think they really got better. It sucks that they missed out on Starling Marte. It sucks that they had to lose their manager, but they were quick to replace him. So I think they're heading in the right direction. They've got a really good squad. I like the moves they made. B+. Let's move to the Nationals, who obviously lost Anthony Rendon, and that was a big thing, but they decided to pay Steven Strasburg instead. So, I mean, yes, you're losing an offensive threat, but you're really strengthening that starting rotation, which was pretty strong to begin with. You have Scherzer, Strasburg, and Corbett. The thing with them was the bullpen, and obviously they brought in Daniel Hudson. They brought him back. They brought in Will Harris from the Astros, which I thought was a great signing from them. Doolittle, you don't expect to have a bad season every year, so you know he's going to come back and be on form. And then the big loss, Anthony Rendon, like I've already mentioned. But I feel like with the additions that they had, they brought back Zimmerman, they brought back Howie Kendrick, they were able to bring in Eric Thames, Starlin Castro, and Asdrubal Cabrera. So small moves, but the bullpen improved. Your starting rotation pretty much remains the same. So for me, B- area, because losing Rendon is huge, one of the best players in baseball, but at least you were able to kind of patch that with some of the minor signings you made. Let's talk about the Braves. You did lose Josh Donaldson. That's the big one. Obviously Dallas Keuchel and Julio Teheran as well, but those are minor things. You have some really good young pitching coming up. You also have some pitchers that you already brought in. Cole Hamels being one. You brought in King Felix. You brought Will Smith to help with that bullpen, which is a huge pickup. And then you brought in Marcell Ozuna. So I think that's a great bat to replace Josh Donaldson. I like the moves that they made. I think they got a little bit stronger. Marcell Ozuna is a big one. The big one was Will Smith. That was a huge pickup for them. I like the moves the Braves made. I'm going to go with B+ for them. So now that we're done with the East, let's move over to the Central. We're going to talk about the Pirates. And they didn't really lose anybody, but they didn't really bring anybody in. The big loss, though, Starling Marte. And I feel like his time was starting to come with the Pirates anyways. It looks like they were trying to trade him for the last couple seasons. I don't really think they got much in return. I know there are high potential players, but with baseball, it's such a risk to trade for prospects. I don't like their offseason. I don't think they got better. If anything, they got worse. They didn't really bring anybody back. So yeah, I'm going to give them a D, possibly an F. I'm going to go with an F. Pirates, you got to turn things around. Let's move over to Milwaukee now, who I feel like you lost Grandal, you lost Moustakas, you lost a couple other guys. You've really brought in some depth though. Pitching though, what is going on with the pitching? You brought in a lot of good offensive pieces. You have the depth there. You have the depth. But the thing is, you haven't really improved the pitching. If anything, it's gotten worse. I'm going to give them a C+, because you were able to replace some of the offense that you did lose with Moustakas and Grandal. But the thing is, you don't really have any pitching, and that was kind of a big issue that you had last year. Next up, the Cardinals, another team that I feel like pitching is an area that they could have improved on, and they brought in Kim, who, okay, we'll see how that pans out. They brought in Liberatore from the trade with the Rays. They did lose Ozuna. They lost Jose Martinez, Michael Wacha. But again, not much has really changed with the team. I'm going to give them like a C. I'm not really sold on the moves that they did make. Liberatore is more of a guy for the future. So again, yeah, C at best. All right, let's talk about my Cubs, which I'm going to give them an F right away. This is a horrible offseason. You lost Strop, Steve Cishek, Nicholas Castellanos being the big one, Brandon Kinsler, Cole Hamels, Ben Zobrist. You lost a lot. And what did you bring in? A bunch of non-guaranteed contracts. The only guaranteed contracts we have are Daniel Winkler, Jeremy Jeffers, Steven Souza Jr. What? I know you're trying to save money for when all our big core players go to free agency, but this is a rough year. All right, let's move to the winner of the division. the Reds, fantastic offseason. They did lose Peraza. They did lose Iglesias, Alex Wood, Derek Dietrich. But Dietrich had like a month where he looked really good and then just disappeared for the rest of the season. You look at the players that they brought in. Shogo Akiyama. You got Moustakas. You brought in Wade Miley to help with that back end of the rotation. You bring in Pedro Strop to help with that bullpen. Nate Jones, if he can come back, he'll be a great addition to that bullpen. And Nicholas Castellanos, great pickup for the team. This is a team that offensively got better, pitching wise got better. Their starting rotation was already one of the better ones in NL last year. Adding a couple players to help with the back end of the rotation looks great. Bullpen help with Strop and Nate Jones. This is a good offseason for the Reds. If they could have added one more bullpen arm, I would have given them an A+. This is a great offseason. I'm going to give them an A-. This was amazing for the Reds, and this is a scary team for the Central and in the future. All right, last division. Let's fly through it because a lot of the teams in the division didn't really improve too much. We're going to start with the Rockies. I'm going to give them an F as well. Horrible offseason. They didn't really change anything with the team, and they've pissed off their best player, and now he wants to leave. Arenado wants out. You don't really have any pieces to build with. And you didn't improve your team, which is why Arenado wants to leave. He wants to win, and you're not really making moves to win. Rockies, terrible. You're getting an F. Let's move to another team that didn't really get much better, the San Francisco Giants. I'm going to give them a D. The only real addition is Yomer Sanchez. That's about it. You know, you lost Mad Bum. You lost Will Smith. I mean, you didn't really do much. You got really worse. We're going to go really worse. You got much worse. We're going to go with a D for the Giants. We're going to head to the Padres next, which another team, they made some small moves here and there. You know, Drew Pomeranz was an addition. Tommy Pham being the big one from the trade where they sent Hunter Renfroe to the Rays. They also lost Urias, Xavier Edwards. But I felt like they were going to spend money this offseason. I felt like they had some money to work with, and they didn't really make too many big changes. So for me, I'm going to give them like a C+, because Tommy Pham is a great addition to the squad. They brought Jurickson Profar, who, if he pans out, could be a great addition as well. Trenton Grisham, still trying to figure out if he's going to be a good ball player or not. Kyle Barraclough on a minor league deal with the potential to make it to the bigs. Again, I think Tommy Pham's a good addition, but I don't think it's good enough to really make an offseason. So C+ for the Padres. We're going to move to one of the better teams in the division now, I think, the Diamondbacks. Great offseason for them. Yes, they lost a couple small pieces, Wilmer Flores, Hirano, Adam Jones, Gerard Dyson, and that's really kind of the bigger names with the squad. But when you look at what they were able to bring in, they brought in Hector Rondon for the bullpen. I think that's a decent low risk, high reward option, you know, basically replacing Hirano. And then you look at Mad Bum, great pickup. That is huge. And then the trade of Starling Marte to play center field so you can move Ketel Marte back to the infield. Solid business this offseason. I really like the moves that the Diamondbacks made. They also brought in Cole Calhoun. I like the Diamondbacks offseason. I'm going to give them a B+. I think it was really good. And I think if they addressed the bullpen a little bit more, that would have been in the A range. Let's finish with the Dodgers, the team to beat in the West. And they didn't really lose anybody. And they're looking to make the team even better with the addition of Mookie Betts. If they get Mookie Betts, I think this is an A offseason. I think this is just a B offseason for the Dodgers. They brought in Blake Trinan. I think that's a good move. Alex Wood, low risk, high reward. Very underrated signing for the starting rotation. Yes, they lost Ryu to the Blue Jays, but Alex Wood definitely fits in that spot. Jimmy Nelson, we'll see what happens with him, but I think Alex Wood is definitely a solid 3. You have Kershaw and Buehler carrying that 1 and 2 spot. So, I mean, if you have Alex Wood in the 3 and then the rest of your rotation set anyways, I think the Dodgers still did really well this offseason. B for them. So that's going to end it, guys. Probably went a little bit longer than I anticipated, but we had a lot to talk about. I tried to keep it short and sweet, but I wanted to give a good explanation why I gave each team their rating. So I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, thumbs up down below. Again, in the comment section, let me know your differing opinions, where you agreed with me, and again, where you disagree with me. I want to know in the comment section. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy baseball content, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that bell icon so you're notified whenever a video does go live. All social media links down in the description below. Go and give them a follow if you haven't yet. And I'll put 2 videos on screen, my most recent, and also one that YouTube recommends you check out. Go and give them a watch if you haven't yet. I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.